Hi, this is Paul Kelley from NCGR, welcoming you to another beginner's astrology lecture. This one is going to be also on the zodiac signs, as my first lecture was. If you haven't viewed that yet, you might want to start with that. It covers the characteristics of the zodiac signs and why they are what they are, how we create zodiac signs from combination of four elements and three modes. This lecture is going to go deeper into the zodiac. We're going to look at the relationships between the zodiac signs, which is essential for further understanding of astrology. We're going to kind of bounce around the zodiac like gymnasts, looking at signs opposite each other, 90 degrees from each other, 120 degrees from each other, understanding the relationships that each sign, relationship that each sign has with each other sign, and general cycles and patterns that exist within the zodiac. So let me start screen share, and I will begin with my PowerPoint lecture here. Okay, there we go. So the class and this whole series of lectures is brought to you by NCGR, the National Council for Geocosmic Research, an organization of professional astrologers that have been around since 1979. You don't have to be a professional astrologer to join, but you will meet many professional astrologers if you do. NCGR has a lot of activities going on. And in terms of education, there are webinars sponsored by the national group. There are also local chapters which have meetings. And as I'm speaking to you now, we are still in the pandemic era. So these are online and hopefully will continue to be offered online even once it's safe to meet again in person. This is an opportunity to get to know astrologers and their work, to practice your astrology, to meet, most importantly, to meet other astrology students and establish yourself in a kind of astrological community. If you want to dig deeper into astrology education, Mira Epstein offers classes that will lead to professional certification. You don't have to take the exams for professional certification if you take these classes, but you will get a thorough grounding in astrology. These would be appropriate to begin after you have a grasp of the basic knowledge, for instance, that I'm presenting in these lectures. Jackie Slevin is the person who coordinates the webinars and works alongside Mira to promote education within the organization. There are also some benefits to becoming a member. You get discounts to the conferences that NCGR organizes every now and then, and I can't say enough for conferences as a way to get to know other astrologers and other astrology students. They are a lot of fun. This isn't a boring sales conference or anything like that. These are staying up late and going out and meeting friends and listening to lectures and just getting to know the astrologers who are big name professionals and who tend to all welcome people because we're all outsiders and we love other people who are interested in us, even though we're outside of the mainstream. And astrology seems to be becoming more popular again. So we hope that there are many young people out there, maybe some of you are watching this video, who are interested in learning more and connecting with other astrologers. Finally, I want to mention publications and newsletters, which are ways that NCGR reaches out to its members. There's a research journal, a regular type of magazine publication, and biweekly newsletters, announcements of meetings, and the newsletters also contain short articles and other things of interest to astrologers, book reviews, announcements in the astrological community, things like that. So National Council for Geocosmic Research, the website is www.geocosmic.org. If you type in ncgr.org, you'll go to a different organization. So geocosmic.org, your astrological home. This lecture is about the relationships between the zodiac signs, and so I have framed it with the analogy of an ecosystem. I used to teach um, geography, and I also have a background in college. I was an environmental studies major, so ecosystems is something from way back before I studied astrology that I learned about. And I think it's a good way to approach this topic because it is an ecosystem is all about plants and animals, non-living components of a place that work together to create a community. And it's all about energy. It's about energy going from one form to another. It's an animal eating a plant, that animal getting eaten by another animal, that animal dying, decomposing, getting broken down by microorganisms, returning to the soil providing nutrients for plants to grow, the creating oxygen, using the sunlight, getting water in, all of these things working together, relationships interacting and depending on each other. One element of that changes and the entire ecosystem changes. So how is the zodiac signs, how is the zodiac, the 12 zodiac signs, how is it like an ecosystem? Well, it's a system of energy, and so is the zodiac. Each sign relates to all of the other signs. The nature of those relationships is what we're going to be looking at in this lecture. And the signs balance each other, they challenge each other, they support each other. It's a system in balance. Every part is a essential piece. You take one piece out of the puzzle and you're missing part of the whole. It's no longer a functioning um, system. The one difference is that ecosystems tend to have a spatial extent. They overflow with other ecosystems. The zodiac really describes the energy of everything. And as I said in my last lecture, everything is energy. So there's no inflow or outflow necessarily, but all of the other elements are there in that it's a system of interrelated energies. So throughout this lecture, we're going to be using the zodiac wheel. I'm giving this lecture on the first day of spring in the Northern Hemisphere. The sun is at 0 degrees of Aries, so it's appropriate that we talk about this. And we're beginning with a zodiac wheel, which always we're going to place the first degree of the first sign, which is Aries, at the 9 o'clock position. There's a reason for doing that. It is where a chart typically begins with the eastern horizon when you do a natal chart. But keep in mind, this is not a chart. When you do see a chart, you'll see that wheel of zodiac signs in that chart, but it won't be oriented like this unless the person happens to have been born exactly when the first degree of Aries was on the eastern horizon. And yes, it is the eastern horizon on the left, different from what we're used to looking at in maps. We'll talk about charts probably 2 lectures from now. So that's a ways off, but I want to get you familiar with this ring of zodiac signs. The signs always go in the same order, and when you complete the circle, you start it again. So the last sign, Pisces, is right next to the first sign, Aries. The zodiac wheel, as in many other aspects of a chart, things proceed counterclockwise. So that's another strange thing to get used to in astrology. A lot of things go counterclockwise rather than clockwise. Signs begin 9 o'clock position, circle around to the sign of Pisces, which ends at the 9 o'clock position where Aries begins. So let's jump right in. As soon as I take a sip of water. The first relationship we're going to explore is that of opposing signs. Opposing signs balance each other. We're looking at signs here, Aries and Libra, the first and the 7th signs. So whenever you think of Aries, think of Libra. Whenever you think of Cancer, think of Capricorn. This is the kind of mental gymnastics that becomes almost second nature and is an essential part of astrology. And it's just part of, it's a process to learn this. And it's a process that you learn maybe through memorization, but primarily also through practice, and a little bit of both. And everyone has different learning styles, so work with what works for you. Signs that are opposite each other share a polarity and a mode. So if you recall, the zodiac signs are divided into two polarities. One is positive, one is negative. And we're not talking about judgment here. We're talking about not good or bad, but positive and negative, the way the two ends of a battery are positive and negative. You might call it yang and yin, or masculine and feminine, or extroverted and introverted, or more outgoing or receptive, active or receptive. Opposing pairs, as I said, balance each other, but they may also oppose each other. They may confront each other. They may butt heads. This one should be the Capricorn Cancer axis, obviously, because it's two goats butting heads, but we're talking about Aries Libra, so we'll just put the picture there. Let's look at the opposing pairs by mode. So first, the cardinal mode. And we're going to start with the first sign of the zodiac, Aries, which is cardinal fire, and its opposite, cardinal air. Fire and air are the same polarity. They're a positive polarity. Now, opposites are like two sides of the same coin. Let me go back to this slide for a second. When you're looking at the world through your side of the coin only, chances are you're going to butt heads with the other side, or you're not going to see the other side. Because it's the other side. You might not be aware that you're one side of a coin. You might just think you are the coin. When you're balancing the opposites, you gain an awareness of the fact that you are one side of a coin and that there's another side, and together you make the coin. And there can't be a coin that's only one-sided. It has to have two sides. So opposing pairs, yes, they are about confrontation. That happens. But they are also about awareness and balance. So back to our example. Each opposing pair, well, is like a seesaw. You have to recognize that there is a seesaw, or it's like a coin, and you have to recognize a coin. So what kind of a coin is the Aries Libra axis? It's an identity coin. And we go from one end, which is me oriented, to the other end, which is we oriented. So Aries is me. What do I want? What do I want to do? Let's go do it. Let's get out ahead of everyone else. And let me rely on myself, establish myself. Let me get out there. It's just this initial burst of energy. It doesn't need anything else. It's just, let's get started. Libra, well, before I do this, let me consider how this affects you. Let me consider how this affects us. I might act in my own interest, but I'm also going to weigh it against your interest because I want us to be a harmonious couple, a relationship. I want the relationship to be of primary importance. So as you can see, one side without it, they are opposing and they can butt heads. Obviously, you run into an Aries type and a Libra type. It's me, I want to do this. And it's like, hey, I'm trying to accommodate you, but you want to do your thing. What about my thing? Let's do something together. So they can be confrontive. But when you see that they're both sides of the same coin, they both have to do with how do I identify myself, then you begin to see that there's that both ends are necessary, that there's positive aspects to each. So Aries establishes the identity and the clarity of direction, purpose. Libra establishes the harmonious nature, the balance, the fairness, the justice, the consideration of others that makes things pleasant. It's hard to be in a relationship to balance things if you don't have a sense of yourself. That's what Aries provides. And it's good to relate to other people and to create a pleasant environment and a harmonious relationship because it helps ourselves energetically. It's nice. We like it. It gives us a rest from all that Aries energy, the go do myself energy. It balances it out. And so there's two sides of the same coin, and we strive for balance. Balance is a very Libran thing. Oppositions are kind of Libran things. Next axis, the negative polarity or the yin polarity. earth and water. We're looking at the Capricorn, also in the cardinal mode. We're looking at the Capricorn Cancer axis. This I kind of call the parental axis. It's about responsibility and obligation. How do we raise others? How do we take responsibility for others and for things in life? So Cancer is concerned with the home, with the family, with nurturing and caring. Capricorn is concerned with work out in the world, with doing things in society, building up a reputation, yes, but also taking on a role to get work done in the world. Responsibility, obligation, it's common in both of these signs. And you can see how they can be opposites, how they can confront each other. I'm going to work. I want to stay home. Which do I do? These two energies are opposing, but they are both about responsibility and obligation and balancing the two, work-life balance, right? Classic thing everybody hears about, and we all try to achieve in our lives, balancing responsibilities in the larger world to responsibilities to our personal world and those around us. Let's move on to fixed mode. Fixed mode establishes things, secures things. We have the Earth and water negative polarity axis first, Taurus and Scorpio. This is about security. Okay. Taurus looks at material security, stability, enjoyment, and pleasure of things that it perceives through the senses, and it wants to keep those things and secure them so that they're there for their enjoyment. Scorpio seeks security through understanding and mastering of the emotions. So this is a deep understanding of emotion, so that no matter what happens to the things around you, you have what it takes in your guts to still survive. And that kind of deep personal experience on the emotional level is what Scorpio is about. And so you have the two ends of the spectrum of security. One's material security, one's emotional security. One's not better than the other. Obviously, you could get into that contest of like, well, I want my stuff, I want my bank accounts, I'm going to invest, I want security, versus, well, I want to understand myself emotionally, I want to have deep connections with other people, I want this to be my sense of security. There's nothing wrong with either. They're both necessary. They're both two sides of the same coin. Leo and Aquarius. This one took me a while to come up with a name for the coin, but I ended up calling it the focus of development axis. So what are you focusing on developing? Is it the individual and their creative talents, their creative output, their purpose in life to shine as an individual in their own unique expression of life's energy? Or is it the community, the whole, the collective? It is the individual and the community. Again, it can be versus, right? I want all the attention versus do what's good for the good of humanity and the good of the tribe, the good of society, the good of the community. Two sides of the same coin. What do you develop? Is it the individual or the community? Well, both, right? And when we're aware of that, we can balance these two energies rather than turning it into a competition for attention. Mutable modes. Mutable oppositions are interesting. They're very stimulating. I have a lot of mutable energy in my chart. They tend to go all over the place. And so when you're talking about the yang axis of mutable signs, you're talking about Gemini and Sagittarius, and these are all about learning, and knowledge, and education. So Gemini is going to learn on a local level. It's going to learn kind of everyday things, how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide, how to read the newspapers, process information, speak, communicate, get things done in the everyday world. And Sagittarius is going to learn about concepts, about religions, cultures, philosophies. It's going to think conceptually. It's going to lift above that local level and the everyday kind of level of things you think about into broader conceptual things. It has a more global focus. So think global, think local, act global, right? That is a kind of a Gemini versus Sagittarius thing. Again, recognizing that they're two sides of the same coin, they both deal with knowledge. If you can't add, subtract, multiply, and divide, or talk about what's going on or what you need with a neighbor or a sibling, understanding the concepts of the world and great philosophies, is not going to be enough, and vice versa. So Sagittarius lifts us into broader, higher learning, higher education, I should say, conceptual kind of learning, global kind of awareness, worldliness, and Gemini, more local, everyday kinds of knowledge, data processing, information gathering, and using. The Virgo-Pisces axis is one of service. So Virgo, being an earth sign, is practical service, whereas Pisces, being this ethereal water sign, is more of a soul service. It's serving humanity. It's serving the universe. It is providing through artistry or through compassionate service. It is taking care of the things that go unnoticed or unexpressed in the world. And as such, it really does serve us well. Virgo takes care of the practical needs. If you put the two together, you can have a fantastic artist. Think of the 1930s. Neptune is a sign often associated with Pisces. Neptune was in Virgo in the 1930s, and you had these fantastic folk musicians like Joan Baez and Bob Dylan, who combined a real skill with that artistic sensibility. So the Virgo provides the practical skills in very great detail, a lot of technique and ability and know-how in the practical world, whereas Pisces provides the inspiration, the intuition, the sense of the unexpressible, and putting it into an artistic form to give that release to all of humanity when that feeling is expressed, that thing that goes unseen or is intangible is put into a form and expressed through artistry. So, and it can also be compassionate service. So to the point of being self-sacrificing, helping others, the underdog, helping people who have been treated harshly by life. So again, combine that with practical know-how, and you can be a very effective server. You can really help people that way. So earth and water, the service axis, and the mutable signs. We're going to move on to elements. Signs of the same element share a polarity. So all of the fire signs are positive polarities. The water signs are negative polarities. Obviously, they share an element. They're of the same element. By definition, they share an element. So there's a familiarity between them. The angle between two signs of the same element is 120 degrees. It forms a triangle around the zodiac wheel. Signs of the same element have an ease, a familiarity about them. Recall that elements are kinds of energy, and so they're all the same kind of energy. There's a familiarity and ease of flow, and the 120-degree angle in astrology is called a trine. So think a triangle, trine, a 120-degree angle, 1/3 of the way around the chart. Okay, so here's a little rant. You know, when you get those little posters, Capricorn is compatible with Taurus and Virgo, avoid Cancers, avoid Aries, and avoid Libras. Well, that's based on sun sign astrology. First of all, there's a lot more than your sun sign. It may not even be the most important thing in a relationship. We're going to talk about the planets. I'm going to cover that in my next lecture. So in this lecture, I'll just say this idea of compatibility in the kind of supermarket tabloid column sun sign astrology, or in those little posters or t-shirts that you get. This is what it's based on. It's based on the idea that signs of the same element have a familiarity about them. Again, there's so much more that goes into a relationship. Sun sign compatibility, it may not even be the most important thing. Each trio of signs has one sign in the same mode. So this is the first thing we're looking at that has a different mode. The polarities had the same mode. This has the same, oppositions rather, have the same polarity in the same mode. Elements, signs of the same element, have the same polarity but a different mode. They have a same element which is different from oppositions. So these are the fire signs, right? Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. I'm not going to get into much depth because we talked about the nature of these three signs and the fire energy in the first sign, in the first lecture. Keep in mind that a fire sign energy is simply this inspired, immediate type of energy that expresses itself. It doesn't take into account what the outcome of the expression will be. It's just an automatic type of inspired energy that expresses itself. Very intuitive in a kind of instant knowing kind of way. Earth signs, Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, again, are practical, down-to-earth signs oriented toward the material world. Air signs, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, live in the realm of ideas, communication, social relationships, interactions, information, and data. And the water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, all have some element of feeling, emotion, sensitivity, vulnerability, all this associated with the water signs. Each time we go through a set of 4 signs, the 4 elements, and move on to the next set of 4 signs, we're stepping up, we're stepping out into a broader area of focus. And I want to be careful about how I speak about this, because it's not that one level is higher than the next. One is simply broader. So when we're looking at Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and Cancer, we're looking at personal concerns. Who am I? What am I doing right now? What do I want to do? Where am I going? What am I about? What do I like? How do I make sure it's always there? Taurus. How do I think and connect to what's around me? How do I gather information and process it? Gemini. How do I protect and nurture myself, care for others? How do I get my needs met? Cancer. These are all personal concerns. And obviously, they're absolutely necessary for life. When we go through the elements a second time, we're looking at interpersonal concerns. These are things outside the immediate self and its needs, but still involving groups of individuals rather than large groups, masses of people. So Leo is a performer who needs an audience. Virgo needs others to serve. Libra needs someone to relate to. And Scorpio wants that deep emotional connection through their experience of others. Interpersonal. The third time, final time through the elements, the energy is focused on transpersonal concerns. And that's kind of a new agey word, so I like to put it in plain everyday language. This is a level of society, of generations, larger things beyond individuals and beyond small groups of individuals. So Sagittarius thinks about belief systems and other cultures. Capricorn achieves through work and society. Aquarius is interested in friendships and causes and community, and Pisces in spirituality and universal truths and the great mystery and art and compassionate service. These are the least personal signs. And again, that's not a judgment, a value judgment. It's simply stating a fact that these have the broadest level, the least personal level of concerns of focus. So each set operates on an increasingly broad and decreasingly personal level. As you move from one sign to the next, there's also an incremental shift, a shift to a broader level of focus. But still, we could say the first four signs are personal, the second four are interpersonal, the third four are transpersonal. Each time, though, we move from one sign to the next, we're broadening our focus a little bit. So we're moving from just me to me and my things, to me and what's around me, to me and my immediate people, my family, those that I depend on. And then we step into Leo and we're looking at me and an audience. Focus is still on the individual there, but now there's a group of people out there they're interacting with, which is not persons that they are immediately connected to the way it is in Cancer. And so each time we move up a sign, we're broadening our area of focus, and each time we cycle through four signs of the four elements, signs of one sign of each of the four elements, and we move on to the next cycle, then we're stepping out into a different kind of stage or arena. Individuals may have a lot of energy concentrated in one area of the zodiac, or they may be spread around through others. Again, one level is not better than another. They're simply different areas of focus. One is personal, it's interpersonal, one's transpersonal. All of them are necessary. Moving on to the third little gymnastic exercise we're going to perform here. We're going to look at the modes. We're looking at the zodiac wheel in terms of the modes. There are three modes: cardinal, fixed, and mutable. 4 signs in each of the modes. 12 divided by 3 is 4. So each cycle of modes is equivalent to a season. You can also think of it in terms of a project or a general endeavor. You start things, you establish them, and then you evaluate them and clean things up and get ready for the next round. Signs of the same mode are, one sign of the same mode is 90 degrees from a sign of the next sign in that mode. So one sign, 90 degrees, you get the next sign of the same mode. So recall that signs of the same element were 120 degrees apart. Signs of the same mode are 90 degrees apart. And they also form those oppositions. But when you're going from one sign to the next, it's 90 degrees. Let's look at the cardinal mode: Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. Again, this is something you'll get familiar with. Think of Aries, think of Libra, it's opposite. Think of the other two cardinal signs, Cancer and Capricorn. Think of Aries, think of the next sign, Cancer, think of the sign before, Capricorn. Mental gymnastics, very useful. You'll use it throughout your life in astrology. Aries begins when the Earth comes around to the point where it's alongside the sun and the sun is directly overhead the equator in March. The day and the night are equal length, hence the name equinox. Because the sun is spreading its energy and light out to the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere equally. Aries begins the astrological year. Happy astrological new year, everyone. I'm speaking to you again on the spring equinox when I'm recording this lecture. So this is the beginning of the astrological year. Good time to start things. It's all about new beginnings. At least in the northern hemisphere, things bursting out of the ground, buds swelling and ready to burst into leaves. This is all about beginnings. Let's jump out from our perspective. Usually in astrology, we're looking at things from the earth. We're looking up at the heavens. Let's put the solar system down on a table and look at it kind of from that objective perspective for a moment. Here's what's going on, and this goes back to my days of teaching physical geography labs in grad school. The Earth is, again, coming around to that point in the orbit where the sun is directly overhead the equator. It will move to a point where the Earth is tilted the maximum amount toward the sun, which is the northern hemisphere summer and the southern hemisphere winter. It will move 90 more degrees, exactly 90 degrees. So it's opposite where it was on the spring equinox. And the sun's directly overhead the equator again. And then as the Earth moves around 90 more degrees, the Earth's axis is tilted away from the sun, and we get the southern hemisphere summer, northern hemisphere winter. We complete the cycle, the sun moving around back to the point where we started, and that is the northern hemisphere spring, the vernal equinox, the equinox in March. That each of those seasons represents a cycle of modes, cardinal, fixed, and mutable. So if we're looking at it from the Earth, as the Earth is moving through that first third of the season of northern hemisphere spring, the sun is in Aries. As it moves to that point where we're getting into the second third of the season, the sun moves into Taurus. As the Earth moves around to that point where it is in the third 30-degree segment of its orbit around the sun, or the third part of that season, the sun moves into the sign of Gemini. Okay, so this is, again, the tropical zodiac. It's called tropical because it relates to the tropics. The Tropic of Cancer, the equator, the Tropic of Capricorn. Those are the points where the sun's rays hit directly overhead on the beginning of each of the seasons, on those points where the Earth gets to this unique spot in its orbit, this point in its orbit around the sun. And we divide that revolution of the Earth into 12 different sectors. Okay, just a little bit of an astronomy there. Okay, going back to our zodiac wheel, notice that signs of the same mode are either opposite each other or 90 degrees from each other, like I said when we started talking about the modes. We've covered the opposition, so now we're going to look at the 90-degree relationship. Signs 90 degrees from each other have a dynamic or conflicted relationship. They have to work to get their energies flowing productively. An opposition requires a balancing of energies and an awareness of the common theme of the two ends of the spectrum. A square requires the resolution of a conflict. Usually it's a situation that requires conflict. Oppositions might have to do more with individuals. Squares are often worked out because there's a situation or through a situation that requires resolving. It's kind of like if you're driving the car, you come to an intersection and there's another driver in another car at on the street that crosses in front of you. And so you're 90 degrees apart from each other, and you have to figure out who's going to go first through the intersection. And that is like that process of working out a square. And just kind of visual way to think about it. And sometimes it's a very difficult thing to work out. And, there might be horns involved and yelling. Sometimes it's very simple and straightforward. When we look at cardinal mode squares, that is Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, we're looking at conflicts that are often productive conflicts because the cardinal energy is tailored to working things out. It's tailored to taking action, initiating things, doing things, getting things done. Well, okay, admittedly, Aries likes beginning things more than getting them done. Capricorn usually sees things through to the end, which again can be good or bad because at some point, some things you just need to let go of, right? But Capricorn will typically see things through to the end. So these signs are, again, by their nature, they're good at working things out because that's what they're interested in doing. They take action. Fixed signs are more challenging when you have two signs that are 90 degrees apart. They're fixed signs. Remember, they don't want to change. So the nature of their energy makes it more challenging for them to work out a conflict. So for instance, with Scorpio likes privacy. Leo likes attention. So there's an obvious conflict that takes a lot of work to kind of overcome. But once that work is done, it becomes very productive. There's a lot of energy released and flowing in a productive way when those two kind of opposing desires or perspectives or energies get working together. Mutable mode, these are very well adapted to change. Sometimes I think you would think like right off the bat that mutable modes would be great for working out conflicts, but I think unlike a cardinal mode, mutable mode changes so much it may simply distract itself from the conflict rather than working it out. Or it may change so often that nothing gets done. So it might not be as productive as a cardinal mode square, but it certainly is one that gets to work on it and finds all kinds of ways to handle situations. So it could be through education, it could be through doing something. If you think about Pisces and Gemini, for instance, Pisces is a sign that would be very sensitive and caring about humanity and the person who has been treated harshly in the world, whereas Gemini can be very rational and logical oriented. They might not be they're not as interested in feelings. It's not their realm. So there's a natural conflict there, but through some education and service work, they can get their energies working together so you can combine the compassion with the ability to gather and process information and be very effective in handling problems in society, right? In housing homeless people, in finding a way to serve the needs of people who are outcast, in marketing art. So sharing creative expression and communicating things that are intangible or things that are, not part of the material world, but that people have this big sense of, Pisces things. So Gemini and Pisces, you get working together, you can do a lot. And the same goes for the other signs in the cycle of squares. So squares in mutable signs stimulate learning, sensing, creating, organizing, exploring, trying out different things. What about signs that are 60 degrees apart? We've looked at signs, neighboring signs of the same mode. We've looked at signs opposite each other, and we've looked at signs that are 120 degrees apart. Again, get used to thinking this way. Get used to thinking of Libra when you think of Aries. Get used to thinking of Pisces when you think of Sagittarius. Get used to thinking of Taurus when you think of Capricorn. What other signs are in the same mode? Think of a fire sign. What are the other two fire signs? Think of a mutable sign. What are the three other mutable signs? And think about the nature. Understand the nature of that energy. What about signs that are 60 degrees apart? Okay, let's get back to that. These are signs that have one sign in between them. They are of the same polarity, but they're of a different element and a different mode. Sagittarius, for instance, in this example, is a mutable fire sign. Aquarius is a fixed air sign. First think, well, there's nothing in common with them, but they are both positive polarity signs. They are both yang, masculine, outgoing, extroverted signs. So that's all they have in common. That's not much. So they're a little more challenging. Think about the difference between Capricorn and Pisces in terms of the energy. Capricorn is about work. It's very material world oriented. It climbs, it achieves, right? It's serious and formal, at least on the outside. It may have to connect with that more open, spiritual, sensual interior in order to get its energy connected to Pisces energy, which is flowing, it's mutable, it's changeable, it's malleable, it goes with the flow, it's compassionate, it's sensing the emotional tenor of what's around it. It's sensing things that are intangible. It has weak boundaries because it's very fluid, it's very open. Capricorn likes to have established boundaries. There's not a lot in common with those two signs, but they can work together. It's not necessarily that they're conflicted. It's just that it takes an effort. We have to stretch ourselves, is the way I came up with, what I came up with to describe it. We have to stretch ourselves to connect these two signs energetically, and that's stimulating. So a sextile creates this kind of opportunity. We stretch ourselves, we get some results. It's stimulating. We want to do more. It's different from that frustrating energy that we work out to make it productive. It's different from that easy flow of energy that just feels good because it's familiar, and it's different from those kinds of opposing pairs, those opposing energies that are really just two sides of the same coin that we then become aware of. We become aware of the coin itself and the two ends of its spectrum. So sextile is the name of the relationship between signs that are 60 degrees apart. Okay, and now we get to the signs which are least similar, the signs that have nothing in common with each other. These are signs, ironically enough, that are neighboring each other. So look at Capricorn, it's cardinal earth, negative polarity. Look at Sagittarius, it's mutable fire, positive polarity. There's nothing in common with them energetically. So these are very hard energies to connect. But what they do share is a common border. They live in the same neighborhood. Remember when we were going through the cycle of elements and how we talked about how each one is an incremental broadening of focus from the one previous. And then each time we complete a cycle of elements, we step out into a broader arena altogether. So there is that kind of that neighborhood that they share, which gives them some similarity, but energetically there's nothing in common. And so they're kind of challenging to work with. So if you have, again, we'll talk about planets in the next sign, but let's say the sun is at the end of Sagittarius and the moon is at the beginning of Capricorn. Those are close enough planets, and what they stand for, what the parts of your personality they represent, are close enough that they are going to interact, but their energies are completely different. So it's going to create a kind of a jarring or quirky kind of expression because they're combined, but there's nothing in common at the same time. And finally, let's look at signs that are next to the sign opposite another sign. So for instance, when we have the sign of Aries, we look to the sign opposite, it's Libra. And who are Libra's neighbors? Virgo and Scorpio. Keep in mind that neighbors have nothing in common. Now, Virgo and Scorpio have a little bit in common. They're sextile. They have a sextile relationship or a sextile aspect between them, and they share a polarity. Libra and Aries share a polarity and a mode. They're both cardinal mode, positive polarity. But Aries has nothing in common with Virgo and Scorpio. They are more different than opposites. So this kind of a relationship, along with the neighboring sign relationships, these are called inconjunct relationships. Combining them, now they do have a relationship, but the nature of the relationship is that there's nothing in common energetically. So it often expresses itself as a kind of quirkiness or an unexpected outcome, unintended outcome, when one sign tries to hook up with another. You start out in one direction, but you end up in another place than you thought you were going to. You express something with one intention, but it's taken a different way. This can be very creative. These people can have very unique talents. The people that have these energies in their chart that are combined. But there is no straightforward way to express these a connection between these two signs. So let's summarize what we have gone through so far. The tropical zodiac is like an ecosystem, a system of energy where all the parts are interrelated. There are relationships between each of the signs, and they all interact. You throw a monkey wrench into one part of the zodiac wheel, and it affects all the energy of all the other signs. Relationships include polar opposites, which balance or confront each other. A opposition represents the two sides of the coin or the opposite poles of a continuum of experience. So remember, we talked about things like security and identity and what you focus development on, the individual versus the collective, things like that. Elements, or the relationship of the trine, that's an easy flow of energy between signs that share the same kind of energy. Modes, square relationship, when we go from one sign to the next of the same mode, expresses itself as a situation that requires working through. It can be frustrating, but resolving it creates a productive kind of work, kind of feel to it. And then we talked about the other relationships. Two signs apart is the sextile. It's stimulating, but we really have to stretch ourselves to connect the two energies. We have to stretch ourselves. I won't have to say a lot. And the inconjunct, which is either neighboring signs or the signs next to an opposing sign. There's nothing in common energetically with these signs. The outcome is quirky or unintended, unique and different in some way. The cycle of modes relates to the seasons. It can also be applied in a more general way to the beginning, middle, and end phases of endeavors in general. And the cycle of elements relates to expanding areas of focus, from personal concerns to interpersonal focus to larger transpersonal, societal, spiritual concerns, universal concerns. Go from the most personal to the least personal. One level is not above another. They are all part of the whole. They are all a necessary part of the equation. So that is the lecture. I hope you've enjoyed it. Your head's probably spinning from doing all that jumping around through the zodiac signs. But I want to emphasize how important this kind of mental workout is, that it will become familiar with practice. You may want to do some just sitting down and memorizing things. You know, what are the fire signs? What are the earth signs? What are the mutable signs? What are the cardinal signs? What's opposite Aries? What's opposite Taurus? This is the way we familiarize ourselves with the signs, and the fact that they're are certain relationships, the nature of the relationship between two signs can be known by their relative positions in the zodiac wheel, tells you again something else about the zodiac as a whole. It tells you some vital information. It gives you some vital information that you'll use when you interpret charts. The organization, again, that is sponsoring this series of lectures is the National Council for Geocosmic Research, geocosmic.org. It has the education, the webinars, the conferences, the newsletters. If you're a member, you can join at geocosmic.org or find out about membership. You can take much more in-depth classes with Mira Epstein. You can listen to webinars that Jackie Slevin coordinates. You can participate in local chapters meetings, which are still online and hopefully will continue to be online once it's safe to gather in person again. That's all I've got for today. Again, my name is Paul Kelley. If you want to contact me for classes or readings, I have a new email address, paulkelleyastrologer@gmail.com. That's all one word, Paul Kelley Astrologer, but keep in mind there is two E's in Kelley. There are two E's in Kelley, Kelley. Thanks for listening. Thanks for viewing this lecture. I hope to see you back for the next lecture, which is going to be on the planets.